It's great to be here in Brazil. So today we're going to talk about state of information security industry. Before we get into that, why don't I tell you all who I am. I used the name Space Rogue for a long time. Some of you may know me by that name. I used to be a member of the Loft Heavy Industries. Created the WAC-Mac archives, one of the first repositories on the internet for information security software for Macs. Although we didn't call it information security software back then, but testified U.S. Congress on weak computer security in government. Editor-in-chief of the Hacker News Network, and now I work as the Threat Intelligence Manager for Trustwave Spider Labs. Also spoke at DEF CON, Source, been on MTV, etc., blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the state of information security industry. I'm going to talk, before we can talk about where we are today, I think we have to look at the past. So we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the past today. Then we'll look at the present and the near future. And then we'll spend a little bit of time looking about the far future. So the idea for this talk came up from actually a suggestion by Louise. I was at ThoughtCon and B-Side Chicago a few weeks ago. And there was a large number of people there that would say, I've been doing this for 15 years. And by this, they inferred that they meant information security. I heard this a lot during the week. And I was like, the industry wasn't that big 15 years ago. There's no way all of these people could have been doing this for so long. So that sort of got me thinking, got Louise thinking, and we came up with this talk. So this is sort of the inspiration for it. So let's start looking at the past. All right, I wanted to go back 20 years instead of 15, so we can go all the way back 20 years ago. If you remember, George Bush was president, right? And I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Fernando Collor was Brazil president. Is that right? I hope. You had the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Of course, the U.S. refused to sign it because we don't sign anything. The Bosnian War was going on. Home Alone 2 and Sneakers were the two big popular movies. Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, and of course I had to put in the Rockin' Robot cassette player recorder. It's a hot toy for Christmas that year. So that sort of sets the stage for 20 years ago. Now let's look at the internet for 20 years ago. We had 1 million hosts, a whopping 1 million. Huge. Transferring 4 terabytes of data a month. I have 4 terabytes on a hard drive in my living room, okay? And that's how much traffic was being passed on the internet 20 years ago. Mosaic was just launched. Mosaic is 20 years old. Most people connected via dial-up, 2400 baud modem. If you were lucky, you had 14.4. Visa local bus. Now there's a blast from the past, right? 4 megabyte SIM, not gigabyte. Megabyte SIM was $159. And the greatest OS of all time, Windows 3.1, was introduced. Sold 1 million copies in 2 months. Nice little map of the internet there. I don't know if you can make that out on the screen or not. Okay, but the information security industry, let's take a look at that 20 years ago. All right, mostly it was antivirus. Most of the companies that were around 20 years ago doing information security were doing antivirus stuff, right? Michelangelo was the big virus. Kevin Mitnick was on the run from the law for breaking into Motorola and all the other companies he broke into. You had the second RSA conference. And it was, I was at 6, I think, or 8, and it was small then. I can imagine how big the second one was. And it was mostly crypto. If you look at the talks for the second RSA conference, they were all crypto talks. DEF CON was founded. DEF CON's 20 years old this year. Anybody going to DEF CON this year? Loft Heavy Industries was founded. We didn't actually get our domain name until 1994, but we actually had a space in 92. The 8th International Conference on Information Security was held in Singapore. Now this is interesting. The title of the conference was The Need for International Cooperation, which kind of makes sense today, right? You still see that a lot today as a major topic of conversation in the industry. But some of the other topics are also very interesting. Right? You had cryptography and the art of securing transactions, how expert are auditors in the computer security field, Information security awareness, selling the cause. This is 20 years ago, all right? How many think that I mean, these talks could very easily be held at Black Hat this year, and they would totally be topical talks and relevant. But these are 20 years ago. Now, this conference was mostly a theoretical conference, and it was mostly academic people submitting papers and doing their talks. But it's interesting how you read these talk titles from 20 years ago, and you look at them today, and you kind of look, well, gee, have we really advanced or moved, or are we doing the same thing, or are we just treading water? All right, let's jump ahead 5 years to 15 years ago. We now have Bill Clinton president, and I'm going to butcher this name again. Fernando Henrique Cardoso, president of Brazil. I'm not even going to pronounce this. You guys can read it. Anyway, they won the big sports championship. I don't know what it is. I assume it's football. You don't know either. Titanic was the big movie. Video of the year. Hopefully, I assume some of you know who that is. I don't. Tamagotchi was the big present that year for Christmas. That was a video game, a little picture of the pet that you played with on your keychain. All right, so the internet and information security 15 years ago. You had Internet Explorer 4.0, awesome piece of software, right? It's 15 years old. At this point, the information security industry was still a lot of antivirus, and it was starting to grow some. So Symantec had revenue of $130 million. 130 million, that's with an M, right? Not a whole lot. Kaspersky was just founded. But I found an article on the BBC, G8 wages war on cybercrime. That's 15 years ago. That title could be on the BBC today. It would be the same story, just change the date. All right, then you had the 13th International Conference on Information Security. This year it was held in Copenhagen. But again, let's look at the talk titles. The role of government in creating the IT security infrastructure. Developing secure applications, a systematic approach. Analysis of Java security and hostile applets. 15 years ago. We're still dealing with Java. All right, 1997, this was pre-bubble, right? Pre-bubble 1999. I'm going to make a stop at 1999. I'm not going to go to 10 years. I'm going to go 13 years. This was Y2K. Wi-Fi was big. And this, it wasn't just the internet bubble in 1999. It was a big bubble for information security as well. Because you had a bazillion information security companies founded right at that time. VC, venture capital, were throwing money away as if it was growing on trees. You had At Stake, bought Loft Heavy Industries, right? You had Foundstone, Garden, Counterpane, and probably a dozen other ones that I don't remember anymore. Most of them aren't around anymore. A lot of them got bought. A lot of them went out of business. But 99, I think, was a big year for the industry because it put a lot of money and a lot of focus on the industry because of Y2K. A lot of people were spending money on Y2K, and at the same time, they were spending money on security. The next big event, I think, that happens in information security happens in 2004, 2005, 7 or 8 years ago, PCI, right? This is probably one of the largest catalysts of growth to occur in the InfoSec industry. Now, PCI isn't that great. We all know it has problems, right? It's not perfect. It doesn't really, in my opinion, focus a lot on like securing your enterprise. It just focuses on sort of making the cardholder data a little bit less worse. But think about where we would be if we didn't have PCI. Think about the industry and how it would look if there was no PCI at all. Sure, there would still be a lot of breaches and a lot of fraud and a lot of credit cards taken, but the state of information security would be a whole lot worse. I'm really blowing through these slides really quick. Okay. So yeah, PCI isn't great, but it's definitely a major catalyst of growth in the industry. And of course, 2007, I was told it was 2007, 5 years ago, You Shot the Sheriff 1. Who was here for You Shot the Sheriff 1? Anybody? Couple hands? Awesome. Now, I already know some of you are doing the quick math in your head and saying, wait, 2007, 2012, that doesn't add up. That should have been 6 years ago. Evidently, they had 2 the first year. Who knew? Luis saw my slides. He corrected me. All right, so now we've looked at the past. we sort of know where we've been. Let's try to take a look at where we are at the moment. Semantic revenue is now $1.68 billion. That's with a B. Okay, that's a big company. There's a lot of money in the industry now. There's a lot of money to be made. There are dozens of security companies out there. They're not doing just AV. Cyber war is the big topic, and of course the cyber cold war to go along with that. And if you read between the lines in the newspaper articles, there's a lot of positioning and jockeying for position between governments. Organized cybercrime and fraud is probably one of the big drivers of information security right now, because that goes hand in hand with PCI. There's a lot of money to be made, not just by information security companies, but by bad guys too. There's a heavy law enforcement involvement. Forensic analysis, eavesdropping, not eavesdropping, they call it wiretapping, same thing. And of course, we all have anonymous, right? And I think anonymous is discounted a lot, probably too much. I don't think a lot of people in the industry take them very seriously, and we'll talk about more about them in a minute. So that's sort of where we are right now. All right, I want to talk a little bit now about the near future, like tomorrow, right? Maybe next year. And of course, you've all heard this before. Where's the industry going? It's going mobile. Mobile, mobile, mobile. Which of course means Android, 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 for now. That's going to change. There will be other platforms that come along probably very shortly. Android may get bigger, it may get smaller, but we're also going to deal with near field communication, NFC. In my opinion, the next iPhone, if it's called iPhone 5 or the new iPhone or whatever, it needs to have NFC. I think that's going to be big in the US, and I think Apple's going to make a lot of money because of it. But anyway, that's where the information security is going to go. It's going to go into near field communication or wireless, near wireless for transactions, because that's where the money's going to be, right? You're going to have your credit card in your phone, you're going to tap your phone to pay for stuff, and that's where the bad guys are going to target to get their information to, so that they can get their money. Problem with mobile is making the same stupid mistakes now that desktop OSs made 15, 20 years ago. It's almost scary if you look back at the news from 15, 20 years ago and the type of vulnerabilities and the problems in the coding that they were having then, and you apply that to mobile now, and it's almost the same exact stuff. Not good. All right. So return to client server. I mentioned this to someone 15 years ago, and we were talking about, you know, where's the internet going to go and what's going to happen in the future. I'm like, oh, we're going to go back to client server, and everybody laughed at me. And it's like, no, we're not going back to cloud. It can't happen. I'm like, that's what cloud is, right? It's basically the same thing. You have all your applications in a remote location, and you're sitting at a desktop or a mobile device, iPad, accessing your applications over the network. It's the same thing as client server. Different terminology, different infrastructure, but the model is the same. SQLi, XSS, cross-site request forgery, those things are all going to continue to get bigger and badder and worser. There's a made-up word for you, worser. I don't know why we're still dealing with these. Well, I do know why, but we shouldn't be, okay? These problems should really be solved by now, but they haven't been, and they won't be, at least not for the near term. Application security, I missed the slide. All right, application security is going to be big. Of course, that goes hand in hand with cloud, right? Because everything's on the internet, everything's web-based. So you need to look at application, web app security. And of course, anonymous, which I mentioned before, I think a lot of people discount and underestimate. I don't know how, if you get a chance to watch the How to Build a Better Anonymous talk by Josh Corman and Brian Martin, I highly recommend it. They're theorizing, or they're forecasting it. Basically what's going to happen with anonymous works on a revenge model, right? You piss them off, they go attack you. So if you don't piss them off, you're okay, but you never know if you're going to piss them off or not. Problem is that anonymous really doesn't have any leadership, or so they say, but you will have splinter groups. You will have small pockets of people who identify with the anonymous idea, and they're going to say, oh, company X upset me, I'm going to attack them. The skill levels of the attacks will vary, but I think that that's a threat that's going to become greater, at least in the near term, in the short future. All right. Yeah, I'm talking too fast. I don't have enough slides. All right, so now let's look at the far future. Some things are going to change. The industry is going to get bigger, obviously, right? That's a no-brainer. But how is it going to get bigger? I think it's going to get bigger in two ways. Big companies are going to get bigger, and small companies are going to proliferate as well. The big companies are going to get bigger by doing everything. They're going to be very broad. They're going to have a very wide base. They're going to have they're going to do everything. Small companies and large companies are going to need to do that in order to survive. They're not going to be able to be a big company and just do AV. That's not going to work. They need to spread out and add, diversify, right? Small companies are going to be successful if they don't diversify, if they go vertical, if they specialize, right? And they find one thing that they do really well. That's how a small company is going to grow and succeed in the future. And you're already starting to see this a lot in the industry, where one company only does PCI assessments and that's all they do. And they do it okay, and which is fine. Okay, government regulation. PCI isn't government, HIPAA is. HIPAA is a law in the US about health information that basically makes it illegal to give out health information if you're not supposed to people that aren't supposed to have it. I tell you what the acronym stands for, but I always get it wrong, and so I'm not even going to try. Health information, so I tried, sorry. So PCI of course is an industry standard. HIPAA is a government standard. There are other standards out there that protect information as well. In the US, a lot of states have their own standards. This is going to get more strict. PCI really doesn't have a lot of teeth in it right now, right? If you're a company, if you're accepting credit cards and you need to get PCI certified, and you call up your card processor and you say, yeah, I'm working on it. Give me another year, right? And it's no big deal. You know, you can do this for 2 or 3 years. Yeah, I'm working on it. I added a new server. I'm firewalling my system. You know, give me another year. There's no teeth in PCI yet. That's going to change. There will be additional laws as well, and they will have strong penalties to go with them. So the industry itself, like I said before, with the small companies, is going to get more specialized, right? You're going to have companies that only do penetration testing, or only do application security, or only do code analysis. And you're starting to see this already, right? And I don't have any examples off the top of my head. Okay, another big point I want to make. The age of the InfoSec rock star, I think is coming to a close, at least in the way that we know it. I think what you'll see is, again, vertical rock stars. People who are very good at, say, you know, Intel assembly, and they totally rock that. But the InfoSec rock stars that you see now, if you look at the industry and around the world, I don't think you're going to see that for very much longer. Case in point, an unnamed company that about a week ago, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, management of this company basically took all their researchers and sort of made them sort of into a commodity. Well, the researchers at this company weren't very happy about that, and they all left. They quit, right? They took a little rock star diva tantrum and left. Which is fine today, but I don't think they're going to get away with that in a couple of years. And I think management is right. You're going to start seeing employment of information security become more of a commodity for companies. Right now, there's a very strong skill shortage. That's going to go away shortly, right? You have a lot of universities giving InfoSec degrees now that weren't there 5 years ago. So some things will change. I think research is going to return to academia, which is where it started for information security. Sure, there will still be some outside private research done by companies, but a lot of it will go back to colleges and universities. Again, I touched on this earlier, government regulations. I can totally see a day where if you're doing a PCI assessment, you have to be bonded or licensed, right? Your plumber has to be licensed to come in and do your pipes in your house. Your electrician has to be licensed. This is sort of an ongoing debate right now, and I seriously think this is coming very shortly. Government regulations are going to apply not only to the data, but also the people that manage that data. Militarization. Again, I touched on this earlier also. You have the cyber war, cyber cold war. The case in point, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, Lockheed Martin, big government contractor in the US, they won a contract to run the US Cyber Crime Lab. Okay? If you follow my Twitter, I commented that I totally think that this is going to be a militarization of, InfoSec. And somebody disagreed with me. They're like, no, this is totally not going to be offensive at all. I'm like, yeah, but it's run by Lockheed Martin, right? Sure, maybe the cyber crime lab won't be offensive, but you won't tell me that Lockheed's not going to take anything they learn from running this lab and move it over to some other organization inside their company that is offensive, that is selling cyber weapons, right? So you're definitely going to see a militarization of the industry. Where am I? Wow, this was quick. Sorry, Luis. All right, some things will not change. There will still be Java vulnerabilities, right? And there will still be YSTS con. And that's about the end of my rambling diatribe of an opening talk. I don't know if anybody have any questions? I don't speak Portuguese, though. Yeah. Why do I think research is going back to academia? Because companies aren't going to fund it, right? Research takes time and money. Companies want to make money. They don't want to spend it. Some companies, if you look back in, 30 years ago, and you look at AT&T, AT&T had a major research lab, right? Not a lot of other companies did. And so you will still see some independent, corporate-funded research. But I think in 5 years, a lot of that is going to move to research and academia because they're now starting to, with funding, at least in the US, there's a lot of funding from the US government to graduate InfoSec people and get information security degrees. And they're going to need to do research to get those degrees. And so I think the funding is going to go back to academia and universities and colleges in order to get that. I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But that's how I picture. That's what when I look at the world and I look at InfoSec, that's what I see.
You're talking about technological research as a whole. You're not talking specifically about vulnerability research.
Not talking specifically about. Yeah.
I'm talking about vulnerability research.
Both. I see vulnerability research going to government, scary enough, because they want the weapons. And I don't like using weapons and vulnerability in the same sentence, but the government sees a lot of value in vulnerabilities and keeping them for themselves to use at a future date for whatever reason. So I think you're going to see vulnerability research move because there isn't a lot of profit in that, right? It's actually a cost center. If you're a company doing vulnerability research, that costs you money as a company, right? If you ever released a vulnerability, it's a lot of work. You got to call if you're going to do it right? You got to call the vendor, you got to talk to them, you got to work with them, get the patch out. All this time takes money, time, and resources that a lot of companies do not want to spend on. So either if they accidentally find a vulnerability, I can totally see some companies not doing anything with it at all. Or maybe selling it to VuPen for $150,000 or whatever it is they charge or give. Because it costs that company money to deal with that research. And so that goes hand in hand with the InfoSec Rockstar, right? Right now, the vulnerability research is done by the InfoSec Rockstars, and they release those vulnerabilities so that they can increase their Rockstar status, right? As the rock stars go away, as companies no longer pay for them, that research no longer becomes as important for those people. Am I making sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else have anything? No? Okay.